All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the new AIM Certificate Process for UAAs training webinar. My name is Rochelle Wiltsius, and I will be taking you through today's session. With me today to assist is Dottie Vance, or Dorothy Vance. She'll be monitoring the chat, watching for background noises, and just making sure we run smoothly today. So if you do have issues, you can reach directly out to her and she can assist. Also, in an effort to increase transparency and provide greater service to our stakeholders, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website so that you can review it in the future, and for those who were maybe not able to join today's call. If you would like to follow along with today's presentation, a copy of these slides have been posted on our kaiso.com Learning Center. Dottie will go ahead and place a link to both the presentation and the job aid in the chat right now, in case you want to follow along. So with that, let's begin today's training with just a little housekeeping. So first of all, I have muted everyone to begin today's session, but you do have the ability to unmute yourself if you want to communicate with the group. And as a reminder, we just ask that you stay muted unless you have a question during the training. As we progress through the training, I'm going to be stopping for question and answer periods, and we'll also document any questions you have, and we'll go ahead and update the training accordingly, just in case the questions you ask aren't currently listed in the training presentation. You have a couple of options to ask questions. You can raise your hand to alert the team that you have a question or comment. You can use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or if you prefer, you can simply type the question in the chat. And I absolutely encourage you to ask questions that you have during the lesson. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into our agenda for today. In the training, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn about the differences between the old, or what is current, with regards to certificate creation and renewal process. And then we're going to look at the new certificate creation and renewal process. We're also going to look at and discuss a brief overview of the changes in AIM. So what are the high level and largest changes that you're going to see? And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time today walking through the actual new certificate creation process and renewal process in our test environment. So I'm going to do a demo for you in AIM so that you can see it in real time. And then lastly, we're going to discuss some next steps and some other information you might need regarding this change. So as promised, let's do an overview of the current certificate process and then talk about the new certificate process. So if you have been a UAA for a while, you probably are familiar with how this works. So you as the UAA would go into AIM and you would add your user directly in AIM. You'd fill out all of those fields, and then a notification would be sent to us, to KAISO, and we would create and send that certificate request to the user. So the end user receives an email to create and key in information and set a passcode. Then once that passcode is set by the end user, we are notified, KAISO is notified, and we verify all of that data and go through the approval process. This can take up to 3 to 10 days, depending upon the time of day and the time of year. And then finally, that end user is sent by KAISO an email to retrieve the certificate and that passcode and install both the root and the certificate in the correct order. So this is how it works currently. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it's going to look like with this new process. So you as the UAA would still go in and add the user. There is no change to that process. But what will happen is once that user is created in AIM, you will be able to, in real time, download the certificate bundle, which includes, again, both the root and the cert, for your end user. Okay, so you'll be able to download it directly from AIM. Now, AIM will also send an email to the end user with that passcode that they will need to install the certificate. And AIM will store all of that information, both the certificate bundle and the passcode, in its system. And so you're going to download that certificate from AIM and you will send it to the end user yourself. You notice that the ISO has been removed completely from here in an effort to make this process more seamless and more quick. Okay. I also want to remind you, because of the way that this new process works, it's really important that users have the correct email address attached to their account. Going back just a little bit, as you can see, AIM is going to send the email passcode directly to the end user, and when you download the certificate, it will send it to the user's email address. So for that reason, it's essential that all of your user accounts have their actual email address inserted in it. And so for the last 10 weeks or so, we've been sending notifications out to you, reminding you and asking you to update all of your user accounts with the correct email addresses. If you have not already done so, I've linked instructions on how to go about doing this, because it is best practice to do this before this new process goes into production. A couple of other things you're going to want to know about are regarding browsers. Now, I think most people are off Internet Explorer by now. However, I want to mention that this new process is not supported in IE and Internet Explorer. It is supported both in Edge and in Google Chrome. Secondly, I want to mention something called incognito or private mode. Both Edge and Google have this option to use the browser in these private modes. And when you try to download the certificate, because it's in private mode, the browser will force you to save the certificate before it sends it. So it will look a little different, and the job aid won't look exactly correct because of those extra security measures. So we recommend taking it out of incognito or private mode. However, I want to mention, if you are still planning on using this process in a browser in that mode, it's going to look slightly different. So let's take a look at some high-level changes before we actually go into AIM. Now, this is a tab that you're going to recognize here. You see that certificate renewal tab. You probably recognize how to renew or let these certificates expire. Once this change goes into production, that tab will be completely renamed. So instead of saying certificate renewal, it will now say manage certificates. And the reason why is you're going to be able to do more than just renew certificates. You're going to be able to send passwords and revoke certificates, and we'll take a look at that. So the tab itself will change. I want to mention that the way to create a user is not changing at all. So if you have a new user that you're creating a certificate for, there is no difference in using that users tab and entering all of the information the way that you would typically do it. However, what is going to change is the process to renew a certificate. So on that Manage Certificates tab, you can see how we generate a certificate or generate a new certificate or expire a certificate is going to look different. And we'll see this in the demo, and we'll take a look. I think it's actually a little easier because, as I've highlighted here with this arrow right here, you can see that you can do multiple users at a time. You can generate multiple certificates at a time. You can expire multiple certificates at a time. So we'll take a look at that in the system as well. Lastly, going across the top, another big change is on the Manage Certificates tab, you're going to see two links directly underneath it. Previously, everything was just on the tab, but you're going to now see the My Users Expiring Certificates. This is the link that will allow you to renew a cert, and you're going to see Recently Renewed Certificates. This is the link that will allow you to download and send certificates to users. So you'll need to use both of these links or kind of sublinks on the Manage Certificate tab. All right, so instead of taking a look at screenshots, let's actually just go ahead and AIM. I'm going to walk you through the process. It's relatively simple, and then after I kind of walk you through a high level, I'm going to pause and see what questions that you have. So give me one moment to go ahead and transition this over. All right, Dottie, I'm going to go ahead and ask, can you verify that you can see my screen right now? I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same thing.
I can see it.
Yes, I can. Let me see your screen. All right, thanks so much, Dottie. So as mentioned, you can see that the tab itself, the name has changed to Manage Certificates. And right underneath that, I have two sub-tabs, My Users Expiring Certificates and Recently Renewed Certificates. The system will default to the My Users Expiring Certificates, and as usual, the certificate expiration will default to less than 90 days, which is why I see no names listed here. So if you wanted to see all of your users, you could change this to all and click Apply, and now you can see every user that has a certificate and whether it's active and what status it is. Now, in order to renew a certificate, you're just going to select the user box right over here. Again, you can do more than one at a time, and then you're going to click Generate Certificate. That will make their name show up on my recently renewed certificates list. Or another way to get their name on this list in order for me to download the certificate is to create a new user from the users list here by clicking Create New Users. So again, just to recap, I can create a new user from this tab, or I can renew a certificate from my Users Expiring Certificate tab. Now, once that is done, you're going to navigate to Recently Renewed Certificates. I want to mention that this process is not necessarily immediately instantaneous. During my testing and my playing around with it, I have noticed that it can take up to 5 minutes for the name to show here. So don't get too stressed out if you create your user on your Users tab and you immediately come over here and you notice that the name is not showing up. It can take up to 5 minutes or so. Just keep refreshing your screen, or again, clicking Apply also assists with that refresh. All right, once you see your user, you can see their name, the email address that is associated with that account, and then the certificate status. Now, this is completed because I created this user earlier today. We're going to talk a little bit more about all the certificate statuses later on in the training. But if I just created this user, most likely you're going to see something like provider processing or password is being prepared to be sent. And then those statuses will change based on where that process is at in AIM. Now, once it says completed, this is ready to be sent off to the user. Now, remember, AIM will send its own password email to the email address listed here, but you need to download the certificate and send it to the user. So you have two options. You have an option to download the email with the certificate attached, which is the preferable method, and I'll show you why in just a second. Or you have the option to download the certificate only. This will download that file as a zip file, and then you will need to send it, attach it to an email, and send it yourself, okay? You also are going to have the option to resend the password. If for some reason the user didn't receive it, maybe they had something blocked or they just didn't get it and you need to resend that email, you can do so from the icon right here. In case you forget what these icons do, if you roll your mouse over each icon, it will give you an overview of the functionality of that icon. So don't worry too much about remembering what each of these are doing. So the first option I'm going to go through is downloading the email with the certificate attached. So I'm going to click this icon. I want to show you what AIM is going to do. And I want you to take a look at the bottom of the screen because that's where the notifications will indicate what's actually happening in AIM. So once I click this button, you can see that it tells me that the download of that cert is completed. And I'm using Google Chrome. So up in the right-hand corner, you can see that my computer has downloaded an email with the attached certificate. Now it's going to download it in whatever is your native chosen email system. In my case, it's Outlook. Yours might be different. It might be Gmail, it might be Yahoo, whatever you guys are choosing to use. So once it downloads this email with the attached certificate and I click on it, you can see that it will bring up an email with the correct scripting, so you won't even need to write what this is. with the attached certificate, and it will automatically send it. I think I might have seen this question in the chat. It will automatically send it to the email account on file. So you can see this is addressed to S. Smith with the correct subject, with the attached certificate, with the correct wording here. And then I can just go ahead and send it. Off that certificate goes. And remember, AIM is going to send the user a separate passcode that they need to install that certificate. So that's method number one. But let's say that you just want to download the zip file. This isn't working for some reason. Your email isn't popping up the way that it should. You have a second option, and that's to download the certificate only as a zip file. So once I click this button, again, if you'll notice at the bottom left-hand side of my screen, AIM is going to tell me what it's doing, which is that it's downloading the cert. And because I'm using Google Chrome at the top right, here are my downloads. And you can see it's not downloading it as an email, it's downloading it as a zip file. And so I need to open my downloads folder and copy and paste it to an email. Or if I'm downloading it on this computer, let's say for some reason you're on your user's computer, you can download it directly to that computer, right? Now, all this is going to do is provide you a zip file, but we need to give the user some instruction on what they need to do with that zip file. So right above this table, under My Recently Renewed Certificates, you're going to see a link that says UAA, click here for the formatted language to add into the email when you're choosing that download option. So if you click this button, you're going to receive a pop-up that will allow you to cut and paste the wording to an email to attach to that certificate. So this option has a couple more steps, which is why it's not the preferred method, but we do want to provide it to you if for some reason you're having an issue with that email actually being created. All right, and as I mentioned, I also have the option to resend the password directly to the user if they haven't received it. Now, if this email address is wrong, remember, the email AIM is sending it to the email on the account. So I need to change this email first before I resend the password if for some reason this email is incorrect. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to pause here because I bet you we have some questions. And I still have some additional information for you around certificate statuses and how the rollout is going to work and some resources for you. But I see we have lots of questions in chat and we have some raised hands. So we're going to start with the verbal questions first, with the hand raises, and then we'll go to the questions in chat. So Dottie, could you let me know who has a verbal question?
Yes, so we have one hand raised. Arpana, you can unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Yeah, hi everyone. The question which I have is like we have multiple users created for our team, and different members have created those users. Like what is the visibility for those users? So as of today, sometimes the way I see is only a subset of my the users I will be able to see in my screen. And I do not know, like, is there any other permissions that are required? Like,
so I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you asking if there is going to be a change in the users you will be able to currently see with the access that you have?
No, let me put the question in this way. So the users which will be visible only for the ones that I have created, or all the users will be listed in there?
I see. So you're asking if you'll be able to see all of the users within your organization versus all of the users that you've only the users you've created.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I guess my question back to you is, do you only see right now when you're going into the Renew Certificate link, the tab as it currently is, do you only see your users that you've created, or do you see all of the organization's users?
It's a mixed one, so I do not know how that was working.
Okay. So I believe, and let me take this back, but to my knowledge, there will be no change with the permissions as they currently are. Meaning if you currently see all your users on that Renew Certificate tab, you will continue to see all your users. If you only see some of your users, you will only see some of your users. But unless there's someone else on the team that I have that knows more that might be able to answer this question, we'll just go ahead and take that as a parking lot question.
Hey, Rochelle, this is Steve Daynard. Could we re-ask that question? Unfortunately, I was on mute, so please re-ask the question. I think I can answer it.
Yeah, Steve, let me give an overview here. We want to know if a UAA will be able to see every single user from their organization on the Manage Certificates tab, or if they will only be able to see the users that they have physically created themselves.
The UAA can see all of the users within their organization, not only the ones that they created themselves.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
It got
Yeah.
answered. Yeah.
There's a caveat too, right? So you can have multiple environments for your organization too. And so you may be a UAA for one environment, but as an entity, your BA may have 2 or 3 like we do in our entity. We have 3 different, so we have to have 3 UAA accounts for each environment to see everybody at your organization. You know what I'm saying? So if you need more access, you have to create user UAA accounts for each environment that belongs to your entity if you're trying to see everybody at your company.
Correct. Yeah.
You're correct, Ken.
All right, let's take some additional verbal questions, and then I know we have some questions coming in the chat. Dottie, any additional hands raised?
Currently, I do not see any additional hands raised, Rochelle.
Okay. Now, keep in mind, you guys, you can ask questions at any time, but let's go through some of these questions in the chat because I think that they're really good and I want to make sure we are all going over them. So Dottie, let's go ahead and scroll to the very beginning, and can you go through some of these questions?
Yes. Okay, so we had our first question from Chris. He asked, will the UAA be copied on an email going to end user? We responded with that answer, the password will not be copied, and also you answered that in your presentation a little bit after that. The next question that we had come in is from Robert. When does this new AIM interface take effect? We had our SME respond, Steve. He said that these changes should be in effect very soon, probably this week. We had another question come through the chat. It says, when it comes from David, it says, when it comes to the password to install the certificate, is the password sent something we can generate for users as the UAA, or is it a system-generated password that only the user will receive? Again, our SME Steve responded to this question. The answer is the password is a system-generated and will be generated once only. We had another question come through the chat from David. The question is, how long is the certain password kept on AIM to re-download the cert and or resend password? For this one, I believe it's the certificate and password will remain for 5 days only. We had another question come through for how does the process, from David, sorry, how does the process work for machine certificates? About the same as currently where a UAA may be the email, then copy the certificate, the machine, then install per the instructions. The machine does not have access to the internet, only the ADS ports. I'm checking to see, I do not see a response for this question yet.
All right, thanks, Dottie. So let's see, I have some subject matter experts on the line. Does anyone know, maybe Steve Daynard, if you were able to test or if you know anything about certificates that do not have access to the internet and what the plan is for those?
I'm not sure on certificates that don't have access to the internet because this is all internet based. I do know that if you have a machine for an API call, it's dependent on the technology used. And Gavin, I think you're on the call. Can you join us here, Gavin?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like Steve said, for machines with API calls, the certificate installation is dependent on the technology. So for example, if you are using Java, you have to install the certificate on your certificate repository, and you have to make sure that you have the root certificates installed also. So Java, then .NET, based on your technology, the installation will be different. So the instructions given is for a normal user who is going to use the browser to connect to any Kaizo websites. But we don't give individual instructions for each type of technology. That will be dependent on the users who will probably know best about their own technology.
All right, thank you so much. I do see another question here about the file being P12 and not a zip. Yes, I apologize. I've been saying a zip file, but it's actually not a ZIP file. It's that .p12 file. So, however, it contains the bundle of everything that you need and can get attached to an email. Let's see, I have another question here. Our company added a new email address for one group in the company. The users with those email addresses still have access to their old email, but it would be convenient to update those new email addresses. As a UAA, can I update those email addresses, and will that interfere with their certificates? Or should I wait until it is time to renew? I can answer the first part, which is you can absolutely update those email addresses as a UAA. And I do not believe, I'll ask my Steve, that I do not believe that it interferes with their current certificates, but maybe Steve Daynard, can you answer that question?
Yeah, if the email address in AIM is the one that the certificate would go to. So if they change the email address, they should get their certificate sent to the new email address.
But it won't interfere with their current cert, correct, if it's not time to renew?
No. Yeah,
right.
Just changing the email address does not affect the certificate.
Great. All right, I see a question from Justin. Will the user get a set of instructions to install the root certificate, immediate cert, or something similar? Absolutely. You're headed right in the right direction. I'm going to show you guys a copy of the email that is sent to the user, and we have updated the link with the instructions on how they should go about installing that certificate. So the answer to that is yes. I also see a question from Eric about the presentation being posted after the training. It is actually posted currently for those of you guys that are joining late. All right, let's go ahead and move on, and we'll have another opportunity for questions at the very end of the presentation. I have a few more items to go over with you guys, and you guys are exactly on par with where we need to be because you've already asked me some questions about them. So the first thing I want to mention are the different certificate statuses that may show in AIM. You may see a variety of these, and they're going to change based on where it is in the process. As I mentioned, you could see completed if the certificate process has been completed and downloaded. I've seen processing at provider, processing before provider as it's getting processed and created, getting ready to email the password. But one of the ones I want to specifically point out for you is that something went wrong certificate. So if you receive some sort of error, you'll see that we ask that you wait 1 to 2 hours. The system may deal with itself on the back end, and just come back to it 2 hours later. If you still are having an issue, then you can go ahead and contact customer support. In the job aid I have created that will walk you through this process, these certificate statuses and what they mean are listed directly in the job aid so that you have a reference for them. In addition, someone asked this question, which was a really good question, is have the instructions been updated so that the user knows what they need to do? And the answer to that is absolutely. So the link in that email is going to refer out to an updated set of instructions. However, you can also get to those instructions via our website as well, and they have all been updated with the new process. We have also updated the AIM user guide with these changes, so you'll see all of those updates as well. Now, there's one additional thing I want to caution you of. If your user has never had a CAISO certificate, so we're only talking about new users once this goes into production, and if you're still using the old AIM URL, so I'm not sure if you guys have seen, this is part of a separate, unrelated project that we called F5. We have been updating and replacing our URLs for security purposes. So if you are using this new process and you are using the old URL, although we're all hoping you're starting to use the new one already, you may receive an error like this that says your connection isn't private. Or the user would receive an error like this saying their connection isn't private. And there is a way to get around this. There's an advanced button that I've highlighted right here. And once you click advanced, it'll say, hey, did you mean to go to this link right here? And if you click on this link, you'll be able to access what you need, or the user will be able to access what they need. So just a heads up that you might run into this. However, you're probably only going to see this for about another month, if that, because then all of the old URLs will get decommissioned and you will not see this issue anymore. But I want to give you a heads up just in case you run into it. So let's talk about some logistics here. When this goes into production, your AIM profile will be automatically updated. So there's nothing that you need to do on your end. We are targeting sometime this week, hopefully, based on finishing up our testing and making sure everything works correctly. However, on the exact day, we will send a notification to you so that you know when that production date is going to be. When you're ready to create a new user, create a new certificate or renew certificate in AIM, once this new process is in production, I recommend that you use the quick reference guide that we put together. It walks you through all the steps. You are welcome to go back through the presentation and listen to the video, but the reference guide goes through the same thing. It'll probably be a little faster for you. The job aid is located on our Learning Center, but I've also added it to the AIM application access page. So if you go to that page, you can find it there as well. And as I mentioned previously, we have also updated the user guide with all new screenshots for you that show you this new process. Lastly, we ask that you report any issues that you have with this new process. So you all should have access to City. Hopefully you have access to City to submit a ticket. And if you encounter any issues, we ask that you report them. Okay. So with that, we're going to move into our final questions. Please go ahead and raise your hand if you want to ask a question verbally, or we'll go ahead and read off the new questions in the chat. So Dottie, let's go ahead and look for any hand raised we have first, and then we'll go to the chat questions.
Perfect. So currently we have one hand raised. Mike, you can come off mute and ask your question, please.
Hi, thank you. We've had some cases where we have active users in the system that are not up for renewal, and for whatever reason, they have lost their certificate or need a certificate reissued. Does any part of this process allow us to reissue an already issued certificate?
I think I'm going to toss this one over to Steve, but I can tell you that this is a new type of certificate. So it is likely that you won't be able to reissue the old certificate once this is in production, because when you renew or reissue a certificate, it will be a completely new type of cert. Is that correct, Steve?
You're correct, Rochelle. You would just go through and generate a new certificate in this environment, in this new process.
All right, Mike, did that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
I'll take it up with Steve offline. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any additional hands, Dottie?
I currently do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to some of the questions in the chat.
Perfect. So we have a question from David Brown. Is is the create a cert limit to an expiration date? For example, if a cert expires in 10 months, can I create a new cert that would expire in a year?
Yeah, Rochelle, I'll take this one. This is Steve. By default, the certificates are good for 15 months. That's the length. And you can't change that. You can't extend it to make it longer. But if the certificate expires in 10 months, you shouldn't renew it earlier than that. But if you have to reissue a certificate at any time, the old certificate will be revoked and the new certificate time period will be in place. The 15 months.
All right. Thanks, Steve. All right, and then I believe we have one additional question in the chat. I'll go ahead and read that one. Will the new process still require the user to use IE compatibility in Edge? I'm going to toss that one over to our technology folks. Do you guys know the answer to this question?
Yeah. So no, you don't need to use IE compatibility mode.
Thanks so much, Gavin. Okay, and then David, what happens if the user does not install the certificate within 5 days? I can give you what I know, and then we'll toss it over to the subject matter experts, which is, I believe you have to create a new certificate if it's not installed within 5 days. Is that correct?
That'd be correct, Rochelle.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any additional hands? Any additional questions for the chat?
Perfect. I'm looking and I see one hand shot up from Stephen. Stephen, you can come off mute and ask your question.
So in the same vein as the last one there, so if the users get a new machine, we'll have to reissue the certificate because it's only valid for 5 days for the initial install.
So the question, if I understand it, is have they already installed their certificate and then they got a new machine, then and they went to load the certificate over to the new machine?
Right.
Is that your question, David? I'm
Yeah,
not
so
sure on that as far as transferring the certificate. I don't know if one of our other technical people can answer that on as far as transferring a certificate.
Yeah, I can take that, Steve. Yeah, you can if the user keeps the certificate and the password in a proper location, they can transfer it to the new machine if they want to. But if they lose the password or the certificate and they cannot access it, then you will have to generate a new certificate.
Okay, we have a couple other hands raised. Gaston, I see you have your hand raised. You can come off mute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you so much. So I just want to ask if today's presentation is recorded and it would be available shortly for us to review it or pass it on in the company. Thank you.
Yes, great question. Absolutely. I'm recording today's session, and as soon as I have that recording, I will post it. So usually that takes about 1 to 2 business days.
Gotcha. Would that be posted within the Learning Center? Is that where we would go?
Correct. So if you go to the Learning Center, to the top right, it'll say New Modules, and it'll be under the title of this training, which I think is AIM New Certificates for UAA.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Great. I see another hand raised from Ken. Ken, you can come off mute and ask your question, please.
Certainly, thank you. Just confirming on the clarity of the passwords, because it sounds like, right, when you run the file to download the certificate, the P12 file, I thought that the passkey is associated with that particular download, right? So as long as you have that stored and you have the password, it should be valid well past the 5 days, right?
You're correct, Ken. For clarification purposes, I misspoke when I mentioned that. So if a user has a certificate and the password, they can install it as Gavin said, after the 5 days.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
All right,
this is Rachel. May I clarify something? The password that we're talking about is stored for 5 days in the AIM system. That means that password can be resent to that user for 5 days. But as previously discussed, as long as they have the password in their email, they can install their cert at any time.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Dottie, do we have questions?
Yes, so we have a couple more. James, I see your hand is raised. You can come off mute and ask your question. Or you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So when we initially go to, let's call it collect the certificate, that has its own password associated with it, right? But if we want to transfer that between multiple machines, let's say for operators that use backup control centers and whatnot, in that particular case, then they need to specifically export that certificate with the saved password. And that's a different process, is it not? And I guess that's the process that we currently use today. I just want to make sure that process isn't changing going forward.
I'll defer to Gavin for that one, right, Rochelle?
Oh, yeah, let me take that. So I think if you have a process right now to manage certificates on your side with different users, that doesn't need to change. Yeah, it's just same as the old certificate. It's just we use a different provider, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
So I see another hand raised from Swetha. You can come off mute and ask your question.
Does the new URL is compatible with all browsers like Chrome, Edge, and everything? Because I in history had issues using Chrome. Some of the users.
So we have tested this new process both in Chrome and in Edge. Correct.
Okay. So it's good with Chrome as well.
Yes.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I see another hand. Oh, sorry.
I want to take the question in the chat, Rochelle, if possible.
Absolutely.
When creating a new cert, at what time in the process does the old cert become void? So this is an important question. So let's say you're within the 90-day period for your certificate to become expired. At that time, when you create a new certificate, you can use both certificates, the old one until it expires, or if you want, you can use the new certificate. But this is really important if you're before the 90-day period. That means, let's say you are like 6 months ahead and you try to renew the certificate, the old certificate will get immediately revoked and you will lose access to the old certificate. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. All right. Dottie, do you have additional questions? Looks like we might.
We do. We have a couple more with Mike. If you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, yes, thank you. Forgive me if I'm not understanding the process correctly. For instances where the user does not have a certificate, does not have a password, for whatever reason, we were not able to retain the certificate in our repository, and they're not up for renewal, can I use the new features in the AIM dashboard to just create a certificate for them?
Steve, do you want to take that one, or maybe Gavin?
Yeah, Mike. So as long as the user's established a name, or you created a new username, you can generate a new certificate.
Okay.
So if for whatever reason something happened to the one, you can generate a new certificate and then install it for the user, or the user can install it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so there's 2 more hands raised right now. I see Gaston, you have a question. You can come off mute and ask it, please. And you could be muted if you're asking your question right now.
My apologies. Indeed, I was on the computer muted. Apologies for that. Steve, would it be possible? I came in late to the presentation just to hear out again timelines expected, or what needs to be done by when. And if it has been talked about that, apologies for that.
Sure. So you're talking about when this process is going to go into effect? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Captain?
that's one of the. Yeah, that's a question. Yes.
So our goal is to, right now we're looking at possibly rolling it out by the end of this week. That's our goal right now. We're still as Rochelle talked about earlier, we're still making sure, testing and making sure everything's right, but we're targeting for later this week. We don't have a definitive date yet, and we'll be notifying all market participants of that via a message.
Got you. And so just a follow-up question. Thank you. That's very helpful. Once it goes live, would I lose accessibility to the old system? Would basically it will be cut off, and we just do all through the new system? Will be a transition period?
The AIM system's still going to be the AIM system. What you will see is once you get transitioned, you'll see the new tab, whereas right now it says like certificate renewal, it'll say manage certificates. Once you see a tab on your UA screen that says manage certificates, that means you've been transitioned to the new process.
Got you. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have 2 more hands right now. David, I see that your hand is raised. Please come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, this is just a follow-up question to what someone said earlier. If in the current process, you can only export the certificate from the machine that it was originally collected from. When we're emailing these across, are you able to export the certificate, or do we only get to use the one that came from the download? So I have it on my machine. I get a new machine in like 2 months. Am I able to export it from my current machine that it's installed on with the password to be stored, or do I have to use the original one? Because in the previous one, if I installed it on a second computer that it wasn't downloaded on, I'd lost the ability to export all the private keys. So I was just curious, and that might help whoever asked the question earlier about installing it on multiple machines.
Gavin, I move you to answer that one.
Yeah, so as I said before, that process does not change. So the certificate is similar to the old certificate. It's just the root certificate is different in the new one. So whatever you were doing earlier, you should be able to do the same.
Okay, so just to clarify, when we get the certificate emailed to us, and I install that on my machine, will I be able to export that with the private key?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it looks like we have 1 more hand raised from Robert. You can come off mute and ask your question, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out when the user collects the certificate, is that the only time the password will be used, or is it every time they log on to KAISO that it's going to be required?
No, the only time, Robert, good question. The only time that you use the password is to install the certificate. Once the certificate's installed, when they go to get into AIM or another application, they'll be prompted to click on their, is this your user certificate? Basically, once they click on that, then it'll go in, but they won't have to enter the password again.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Perfect. It looks like we don't have any other hands raised, but we did get 2 more questions in chat. The first one is this going to be deployed to our test environments for BAs to test before implemented to production, or is this going straight into production?
I can answer that question. So we have actually been doing testing, production testing, with some customers for the last few weeks. So for everyone else, it will look like it is going straight into production, but I wanted to ensure that you guys know we have been doing production testing with external customers.
Perfect. And then the other question in chat is, where can I find documentation from today's meeting?
All right. Dottie, if you want to throw those links back in the chat, you can find a copy of this presentation along with the job aid on our Learning Center. And then in 1 to 2 days, I'll go ahead and post a recording of this session as well for those not able to attend. All right, I do see one additional hand. Looks like, Robert, you have a question. Would you like to go ahead and come off mute and ask that question?
That must be stuck from earlier.
Oh, all right. Well, that was easy. Okay, so it looks like, oh, I see one additional question. Will the UAA also get the email for the user's password? No, you will not receive the user's password. That password is sent directly to the user and the email address on file for the user. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. So I just want to mention a couple of things. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, within a day or two, you'll see a recording of this training session posted on our Learning Center. Also, you're going to receive an email from me with a request to complete a training evaluation for today's session. So we ask that you just take a moment to complete the survey. It really allows us to create a better and more effective training for you in the future. If you do have questions on anything presented here today on the training itself, you can email us at customerreadiness@kaiso.com. If you have issues or questions about the new process, though, you can submit a city ticket, and as I mentioned, please report any issues that you have. So with that, that concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank everyone for your participation, for your fantastic questions. I really hope that you found it useful. We're very excited about this new process, and I just want to wish everyone a great day.
Thank you.